Okay, well, let's get started. Well, I want to go ahead and share the page with you. See, 13 people have showed up. We're still missing a couple. First thing I want to do is look at where we're at currently as far as our activities, what's coming up very soon. If we look at the macro schedule, we are on task. We've already covered chapter 15 on Monday. We'll cover chapter 16 today. But if you look very closely, the paper, I'll start accepting them on, I'll probably open it up next week. I'll open up a discussion forum so you can submit your papers in full. You do not have to submit them in their entirety into Mankiw or Cengage. You just need to submit it. I'm through. Grade it, whatever the little caption says. And what will happen is that I grade papers, your paper will be removed from the forum. So if you post a paper to the forum and you see it go away, by the end of the day, you should see a grade for that paper. I normally grade all the classes. I graded them in no specific order, but I grade one class, then I go to the next, and the next, and the next. So once you submit it, it's going to show it's submitted, but on the 9th, I believe it's on the 15th, it's going to automatically take any I haven't graded to zeros. So just be mindful of that. It doesn't mean you got a zero on the paper. It means I haven't graded it yet. I've got about 140 of these to read. And if they're real good papers, they're easy to grade. That's the reason I emphasize I want you to use Grammarly or Grammar Check or Spell Check. I want you to use the peer reviews. I want you to take advantage of everything available to you. Because if you write a good paper, I get a good paper. And it's easier to read. There are some that are just so painful to read, it just takes too long. And by the time I'm through reading it and posting a grade and comments, I don't need to go ahead and start another one, because any pent up anxiety or anger or whatever I have off the previous paper, I don't want to show it on the next paper. So I want all good papers. And that, like I said, I'll open it up sometime in week 13, in the middle of week 13, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll open it up and I'll start grading as they come in. So if you've got yours completed, you can submit it on the first day that window's open. I should have it graded in at least 2 to 3 days. So I have others submitting as well, but I'll get those fairly quickly. If anytime you have any questions about the paper, just let me know. Either send me an email, whatever you need to do. I want to make sure everybody gets through this class. So we are on task. We know where we're going. And you can see in this next grouping of assignments, and if you look at how the grades are structured, we only have, after today, 4 chapters remaining. 21 and 22 are additional chapters to get into new material. Is more important if you're going into an intermediate class that you read and understand that. But it's not counted towards your grade. And nothing from chapter 21 and 22 will be included on the test. I'll let you know that ahead of time. Okay? And then our final test will be on 11/23 to 11/29. It's not a full 7 days. But it is. Just start preparing for it now. Print out pages that you think are important. Anything I emphasize, mark it down. That way you're prepared when the test comes around. All right. Uh, This is in student view. This is what you should see going in. I have not posted week 12 yet. As soon as the lectures are done today, I will be creating the week 12 post, and it'll include both chapters. So if you miss Monday, you're covered. You can go back and review the lecture, and you should be just fine. All right, any questions before we start chapter 16? All right, let me bring up, it's already, the PowerPoint's already pulled up. I'll bring it up now. Did have a power surge, that probably took them all out. And if you understood what was going on in chapter 15 with the monopolies, and you go back and look at materials that were, I mean, this goes way back in basic supply and demand. It'll make it easier to understand what is happening in monopolistic competition. The monopolies, we only have a single individual involved, or a single company involved, or at least one company that owns or controls 80% of the market share, either through it being a pure monopoly by acquiring the resource chain or delivery. Either way, if they do that to keep other people out of business, that's a pure monopoly. That means they're acting like a monopoly. A natural monopoly, like we said, is like Microsoft. In monopolistic competition, there's another variable at play. It's called competition. And if we go back and look at the basic supply and demand, the pen and line. We're looking at a basic supply and demand. P and Q. And if we look at the demand curve alone, we know if, well, I think we're probably closer to chapter 5 with this, with elasticity. If we have an inelastic demand curve, we have a price here. We raise the price, we see a little change in quantity. We raise the price, little change in quantity. This is more like what we see happening with the monopoly. Their curve is more inelastic in nature. One of the reasons there's no competition. There's no clear substitutes available. Now, in a monopolistic competition, we still use the same methods of determining the optimal level of production as we did with a monopoly. We look for where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. But we know that in a perfectly competitive firm, the curve is perfectly elastic. Means it runs horizontal to the x-axis. So if we have more competition, our demand curve becomes more elastic. And if we raise the price, let's say this is a price at equilibrium, that's our original price. If we raise the price here, we see a huge impact on quantity. So if we remember the movement of that curve based on the size and the number of competitors or availability or closeness of substitutes, we're okay. Because when we get to chapter 16, that's what we see happening with the monopoly. The monopolistic competition. In their mind, they are all different. Burger King don't believe that McDonald's has competition for their burgers, because there's a flame broil. McDonald's doesn't look at competition the way a perfectly competitive firm would. They perceive that their Big Mac is out there on its own. So in their mind, they believe they're different. And the reason we know that is if you just go to exit 97 on I-95, and if you don't know that intersection, I will tell you that there's a KFC, a Popeye's chicken, and a Bojangles chicken within walking distance of each other. There's McDonald's hamburgers, Cookout hamburgers. What are the others? Hardee's is over there. Wendy's. They all in their mind believe they're different. And they think, and they do believe that they have some level of price control. Unlike when we looked at the perfect competition, they didn't think they had any price control because of the numbers and sellers. Monopoly don't worry about that because there's one seller dominating the marketplace. But in monopolistic competition, there are a lot of buyers and sellers. However, they believe their product is unique. What market structures lie between perfect competition and monopoly? And what are their characteristics? We'll get to all of this. How do they choose price and quantity? Like I said before, they're going to use the same methodology we use, the perfectly competitive firm, monopoly, and what we will be using on the oligopoly. It is the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. How does it affect society's welfare? We'll look at that. It's very similar to what happens with a monopoly. And what are the social costs and benefits of advertising? You don't see a monopoly advertising a whole lot because everybody knows their product. If you choose to consume it, fine. If you don't, just go away. Monopolistic competition, they are highly competitive. This is where you're going to see a lot of your advertising monies go to. Firms that are participating in this activity. Now, the extremes, we talked about that. We've talked about both of them. The perfectly competitive firm, which has no price control, they're price takers. We talked about the monopolies and their price makers. And there's imperfect competition between the next two. We have the oligopolies and the monopolistic competition. In the oligopoly, there's a few sellers that dominate the marketplace. They have highly similar and substitutable products. Monopolistic competition, there's many firms that sell similar but not identical products. It's not like when we were perfect competition where they're homogeneous, basically the same products. Now with the oligopoly, we look at the level of their domination, the percentage of total output by the four largest firms. But you look at some of these firms, in most cases with the industries, most of the businesses' market share are less than 50%. If you look at light bulbs, batteries, tobacco, beer, refrigerators and freezers, there's several groups that dominate a large percentage of the marketplace. And even though you look at store brands as an alternative, in a lot of cases, those are produced by these major suppliers. And they're sold to the business so they can use their own labeling. Campbell Soup, they dominate about 80%, but remember, they're all by themselves. They're considered a natural monopoly. When you look at advertising, most of the advertising occurs in imperfect markets because they have to differentiate their products. If you look at just Coke and Pepsi, they don't have those listed in, the oligopolies as far as the industry is concerned, but they are truly an oligopoly. When you look at Coke and Pepsi, I can tell you with 100% certainty, 99.999% certainty, Coke has the recipe for Pepsi, and vice versa. They have the technology to do reverse engineering. They know where they get their sweeteners from and their colorings and everything else. They know what kind of vehicles drive, what they're paying drivers, etc. So there's a lot of strategic interaction between oligopolies. They are highly informed about the marketplace and the producers of the goods that they're competing with. Amazingly, you can go to Food Line or Walmart or Charlotte Coliseum or Lowe's Foods. One week, Pepsi's on sale. The next week, Coke is on sale. Now, you may see the 2-liter Coke's on sale and the 12-ounce can Pepsi's on sale, but you will not see the Coke and Pepsi cans on sale at the same time and the Coke and Pepsi 2-liter bottles that sell on sale at one time. There is variation. But that's part of the strategic interaction. It does give them control of the marketplace. If you look at what it costs to actually produce a Coke or a Pepsi, you're probably looking at about 30-40 cents, including delivery. And then they're charging, if it's individual, $1.25, $1.50, $2, etc. If they really wanted to fight and get dirty in the marketplace, they could really lower the prices very quickly. Monopolistic competition, there are many sellers competing for the same customers. Like I said, getting off I-97, we've got multiple gas stations there, we've got multiple food options available there. And if you want to drive a little further, you can go down to exit 95 and get even more. And between those two exits, each one of them has a Waffle House. There's a lot of consumers. There are a lot of consumers that are getting off the Interstate I-95 for those different options, the food options and gasoline options. You can look at exit 97, and the gas prices normally are 15 to 20% higher, 15 to 20 cents higher than what you see at exit 95. But when people get off to get food, they get gas at the same time, and they don't really care. You go to exit 95, they want to give you an incentive to drive another 2 miles, get gasoline there, and frequent their food establishment. Product differentiation, there's no price takers, and there's a downward sloping demand curve. For some reason, I'm getting feedback. We have free entry and exit when we're looking at a monopolistic competition. Now, you may have to buy a franchise, or there may be a large capital outlay. If you have the capacity, which is the desire capacity to be a consumer or a seller, they will help you out. They'll sell you a franchise. Monopolistic competition, we look at books, computer games, restaurants, piano lessons, cookies, clothing, etc. If you want to see competition, go to the cookie aisle in any grocery store. Go to the cereal aisle in any grocery store. There's a large number of options. And every one of them believe their product is different. Now, this is breaking down to 4 basic market structures. When we look at the 4 market structures, we have only one price taker, and that is perfect competition. They're identical products. And there are many firms involved there. When we look at monopolistic competition and perfect competition, there's a lot of firms, a lot of buyers. One says they're similar products, one says they're differentiated products. These are very similar, but their method of pricing is completely different. Remember, a perfectly competitive firm believes that their demand curve looks like this, and the supply curve. Even though the market is actually downward sloping demand curve. The sellers perceive that the demand curve is perfectly elastic, and if they lower the price below $1, they'll sell all they want. They can sell all they want at $1. If they go above $1, they will sell nothing. That's the reason they're considered price takers. Once we move away from perfect competition, like I said, they think their product is different. And that's the only reasoning behind being able to control pricing. Now, they have to stay within limits. If you've got the Hardee's and the Wendy's and McDonald's and all in the same location, let's say McDonald's raises their price for their Big Mac $12. They're going to find out real quick they don't have that much price control. Because most people can just go on down the road. You can go to Hardee's or Wendy's and find another product. We look at the number of firms for monopolies and oligopolies. Usually have one dominant firm, either as a pure or natural state. And we have the oligopoly with a few firms. Both of these cases, they use quantity to some degree to determine the price. Monopolistic competition is a small degree. We'll see that with our graphs. We're always looking for the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. It doesn't matter if it's a perfectly competitive firm, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, or a monopoly. We're looking for MR equals MC. Write that down. Make sure that you know that. If they give you any schedules, the demand curve, and they give you a price is fixed at 3, you should be able to determine marginal revenue and marginal cost. If they tell you the cost is 3 across the board, that is the marginal cost. And you're looking for the point where marginal revenue is equal to that. We see that here. This is a short run equilibrium, downward sloping demand curve. If this is a perfectly competitive firm, monopolistic competition, we will see a graph very similar to what we saw with the monopoly. We'll see the determination of profits is the same. MR and MC are going to determine the quantity. That point's also going to determine the price. Remember, just like we talked about with the monopoly, we're going to look for this point right here. That is where you have told them, if you produce the goods, this quantity, I will pay this price. That's what your demand curve is telling the business. Now, there are other people that would love to buy it, and if we assume that the marginal cost is the same as the supply curve, because realistically, they're saying the same thing: is this is what I'm willing to sell my product for, my minimum price I'll sell the product for. This is where they should be producing. We talked about this with the monopoly. The same thing applies to monopolistic competition and oligopolies. It's inefficient because it should, if they were truly acting in the market's best interest, this would be the ideal level. That'd be the ideal quantity, and the price would be over here. The price would be but it's not. This is where they believe they have control of pricing. Because of the downward sloping demand curve, it's not as steep as it was with a monopoly, but we still see a downward sloping demand curve, and we see a marginal revenue curve, which is twice the slope of the marginal demand curve. We're still looking for the same point. Marginal cost is marginal revenue. And all this we see here is the welfare cost of that type of market, be it a monopoly, monopolistic competition, or oligopoly, or the dead weight loss. This is the quantity of goods we should have, but we're missing. Now, as consumers, we do have control. We have feet, wheels, transportation. We can always walk away. Or in the case of monopolistic competition, just go next door. You have choices. Now, in this case, we can see that in the long run, as an individual business, if profits are available, they will keep building more restaurants at exit 97 and exit 95. The more businesses that come in, the less market share you're going to have, the less demand for your product will exist. But if your costs remain constant, you may have to look at something that brings the people into your business that you haven't used before. Because you either want to drive this outward or drive this down. You want ATC to be lower than your price. That's how you make money. Now, if you're a fresh startup and you're just getting going, you have a lot of workers that there's a big learning curve they have to deal with. Even though you train them well, train them just like you do at every new store that opens up, there's going to be some losses incurred, mistakes made. If you're a new business and this is what it looks like in your marketplace, you're okay. As long as you can get this ATC move downward. That's the objective. If you've been in business for a very long time, this is what your demand curve, marginal revenue, your pricing looks like, you may want to look at finding other options. With COVID-19, we have a lot of businesses that their demand has dropped off the charts. If you're completely closed, you have no options. Some businesses are doing well, but they were designed, and their system was designed to allow them to keep working. Good example, look at Chick-fil-A. They can move a line as quick as anybody I've ever seen. But you look at other fast foods, you see 3 in line, 4 in line, because nobody wants to wait. Their demand curve is way down. Their cost didn't change. Their rent that they had to pay didn't change. All that's still there. Either they have to find another way to deliver their product to the consumer and make the consumer happy and want their product again, or they need to just accept the losses. As a shareholder, I would not like that. COVID-19 has had a huge impact, especially on the restaurant industry, gyms, and other activities. They do make profit in the short run. It's just like we looked at with the perfectly competitive firms. There's no long-term profit available. You look at the situation that there's a demand for the product. At exit 97, they're going to keep building. If you go to exit 87, Four Oaks, there's nothing there. But I guarantee you, if people start exiting there because of the new Ashley store or whatever it may be, you will see other restaurants moving to that area, the gas stations, and they're going to take care of the individuals going up and I-95, up and down I-95. Now, with the perfectly competitive firm, we know that as people enter the marketplace, the demand's going to fall, and so will the marginal revenue, which is price. The price will fall with a shift, the leftward shift of demand. Same thing happens with monopolistic competition. As demand falls, like we saw on the previous graph, if the demand falls, and for no fault of our own, or in the case with COVID-19, we're going to be losing money. Even if we lay off all our personnel, we're losing money. We still have to pay rent, power, everything else, run the freezers. You've got deadweight loss. Well, not deadweight loss. You got losses in your freezers and your inventories. There's a whole lot of things going on. But in perfectly competitive firm and monopolistic competition, long term, the profit is zero. That's the reason you see people come and go out of this marketplace. You see some companies that have been around a while, 20, 30, 40 years, that did not change with the changing demographics of their consumers. They were strong companies 15, 20 years ago, and now they're nowhere. Now, if you have losses in the short run, like we're seeing with COVID, you have to make some adjustment. I know restaurants that went all out on deliveries, producing products they could deliver to the consumer directly. The consumers are enjoying that. They don't have to go out. You see Domino's commercials where now all you do is pull up and pop your trunk, they'll throw it in and you go away. So there's a whole lot. Yes. Okay, I'm getting feedback. All right. So if we're looking at a situation where we have losses, here's zero economic profit. There has to be a decision made. Now, the firms that operate properly using generally accepted accounting principles, and they're paying all their personnel, including any managers or owners or co-owners, all that's included in the financials with journal entries, debits and credits. If they get to the point where there's zero profit, where price is equal to ATC, which is what we see here, when our profit is zero, we can still operate. We can still survive. But the companies that are in this condition, they're probably going to have to shut down or redefine their product. For an example, Arm & Hammer baking soda. Its original intended use was a caustic material. For one, it could be used for cleaning, but it also it was for baking. It's called baking powder. I don't know many people that are baking anymore. Not at home. Arm & Hammer, they had to redefine their product. And they know it's a natural deodorizer. It absorbs odors. My mother, every month she'd buy one box to put in the refrigerator. The box from the refrigerator went to the freezer, and the one from the freezer went to the sink and was poured down the P-trap to control odors there. That was every month. They redefined their product. They had a situation where the demand for their product went down and their cost was up, so they redefined their product. If you're not willing to redefine your product or your delivery methods or something, and you're in a situation, you will go away. And you can either go away with some of the profits you earned over those many years, or you can leave with none. As long as you try to stick it out and not change, the poorer you will become. But like I said, going back to this graph, if you are prepared, this is not a problem. Because as soon as those other companies, like the previous slide the graph showed, after they leave the market, the demand for your product will move upward. Will move out. When it shifts out, even here, now you see the demand curve move out, it's above ATC, and the profits have returned. Monopolistic competition, excess capacity, quantity is not minimum ATC. The markup over marginal cost. In perfect competition, the quantity at minimum ATC, which would be the most efficient scale, and P is equal to MC. Remember, perfect competition, they have no price control. Here we have price control. Therefore, we're not going to be completely efficient. We're going to have that dead weight loss we saw with the monopoly, and we'll see with the oligopoly later. Any questions so far? I have one question. Okay. All right. I was trying to figure out who caller 7575 number 2 was. So it's Jason. Okay. Now, like we said, monopolies are not concerned with the welfare costs. They don't create as many products as consumer really wants and willing to pay. We do have in this case sources of inefficiency and markup prices over marginal. There's too much or too little entry the number of firms entering the marketplace. The product variety is an externality, and the business stealing is an externality. Just like, and when we talk about stealing, if we're measuring the number of Big Macs being sold, but we're having 50-cent quarter pounders, we're gonna take away from our own market share as well. If we're just measuring the number of Big Macs being sold. So we're pilfering from inside. Now that's going to be temporary. It's just like when they have the McRib. Some of it will be taken from demand of their other products. Welfare costs of society, market quantity is less than socially desired. Because if we got the product that we desired, it would be here at this point right here. Where marginal cost is equal to demand. So we don't have the number of products that we desire, and it's a market failure. It's how this market is defined. Now, the amount of deadweight loss is not going to be as great as you see with monopoly because of the decreased slope of the demand curve. Now, customers get extra surplus from the introduction of new products. So they continue to produce one product and they start producing another, we will end up with extra surplus of the previous product. And the business stealing, losses occurred by existing firms and new firms enter the marketplace. They're not really stealing, they're just acquiring the market share of the existing firms. The strongest firm will have see the least impact. If you're a struggling business, it may be your death knell when that new business opens up. So you have to be mindful of that. Advertising. Advertising is key. In oligopolies, monopolistic competition, you'll see some advertising with perfectly competitive firms. It's more to show daily sales and here's who we are, and they'll have little prize games you can play and all this other stuff. But the majority of all advertising in monopolistic, perfect competition is normally local advertising. Local magazines, print, etc. When you get to monopolistic competition and oligopolies, and they could be regional companies or they could be national or international. They have to differentiate their product with their competitors. That's the reason you see a lot of advertising for McDonald's, Diet Pepsi, Coke. They have to do all that advertising. Beer firms, your Budweiser, your Millers, etc. Now you have your diehards. Just look at I knew an individual said he'd never drive. Said he'd rather walk down the road with a Chevy hubcap than drive a Ford. Ford is excited when that individual comes and looks at their products because he's only going to choose. They don't have to compete with Chevrolet. It eliminates some of the market. I could care less. I want the one that does what I want to do, the lowest cost, and with the most comfort. It doesn't matter if it's Chevrolet, Ford, Dodge, it doesn't matter. As long as it does what I want it to do. Knowing that will make you a stronger consumer. The internet has also made everything much more competitive for the consumer. Because I don't just go to my local dealership and accept whatever they offer. You can drive 20, 30 miles. You can just get online and you can have them competing on pricing. Now, the margins are not as great as they used to be as far as negotiations. But you can still negotiate and get a better price. And the more they think you're going somewhere else, the more likely they're going to compete to get your sale. Now, they want to know if advertising is good or bad from society's viewpoint. Uh, it's good. We know about things that we didn't know about before. We understand characteristics of products we didn't see before. There are some pros to it. We can see some flaws in other products that if we hadn't heard it from the competitor, we wouldn't have known about it. Icons, we're flooded with them. Now you can get on do not call list, but if you've got a vehicle, you're going to get calls every day for extended warranties. There's one going around there now, DirecTV. There's a company calling telling you, well, they'll give you a 50% discount on your bill if you do this and you're lucky and all that. That's a scam. It's not DirecTV. It's not AT&T. So we have to use our own common sense sometimes, determine what's true and what's not true. Incentive advertising, they have to differentiate their products. And if nothing else, differentiate their stores where people know the difference between, it's like McDonald's, you got the playgrounds, a lot of them are inside. They advertise that. They gear food sales to that. You got CC's Pizza, which it is not my ideal pizza. I don't frequent there. But if you've got kids, they'll make a pizza with anything they want on. The kids love it. They know that's what they're there. That's their market. And they plan for that market. Now, with highly differentiated goods, 10 or 20% of the revenue. If they're industrial products, like electric floor buffers, commercial type items, you don't see a lot of advertising on that. It's usually done in trade magazines. Even though they're in a monopolistic competitive market or an oligopoly, there's still not a huge interest in that. It's like with business jets and so forth. I can see that on, during prime time on TV. They're going to focus on a different market. Rolex, same thing. Rolls Royce, same thing. They're very specific and they clearly define their consumer and how to get a message to them via advertising. They don't do that blanket advertising to get everybody to come running in. They're not going to have commercials like Ford and Chevy. Now, part of the cost when you're putting together a product or a service, if you are having to advertise a lot, that's part of the cost of producing a good. You have to include that in the cost of delivering that Big Mac or the Whopper or the Bo Biscuit or whatever you're looking at, or KFC bucket. Advertising is part of that cost. Now, if you're a franchise, most of that advertising is handled from the main office, but you pay for it through your franchise fees. The more differentiated the products, the more advertising firms buy. Because they want to make sure you know the difference between those products. Now, as economists, we look at the social value. Or wasting resources, or is it even valuable to do it? And I would say there are a lot of people employed in the marketing sector. I see that as a job opportunity. And I think it's good that the consumer knows what's going on. It knows the difference between products. And it is manipulation. They're trying to make make you believe that everything, your life will be more difficult if you don't consume their product, or you ignore their desire to sell it to you at a cheaper price. There's been studies in psychology from the selling of goods. They went into grocery store environments. They had two products that were basically identical as far as what they were delivering. It could be uh, beans or corn or whatever, different manufacturers, normally the same price. They would go in there and write uh, half off on this can of beans. In reality, they didn't change the price. The price was still what it originally was. And people will buy more of that product because they perceived they were receiving a 50% discount. If you ever shopped at Belk's, you don't hear them talking about, what the total cost is. They emphasize how much money you save today because they add up all their discounts. Now they're still making money. They're not selling you everything for a loss. They emphasize this is what you save today that you wouldn't have saved if you didn't buy these products. They do want to find brand loyalty. When Coke advertises, like I said, with the guy that would rather walk down the road with a Chevy hubcap than ever riding a Ford. That's brand loyalty. Businesses love that because they eliminate the competitor from the equation. They're no longer worried about you walking away and going to someone else. And if they can do that through advertising, great. Now, when they advertise, Bud Light and Doritos and all during Super Bowls, etc., they're not there to get people off the fence. I mean, but they're not there to get their brand loyal customers. They're there and they spend that $10 million to 30-second ad to get the people on the fence. Make them think about Bud Light or Doritos the next time they go into a store. Now, advertising can impede competition because if you can't afford to do the advertising and everybody else does, you kind of get lost in the shelf. It provides good information. Now we see drug companies that are advertising. One thing with them, with drug companies, they are required to do some kind of statement about what the side effects could be, et cetera. And some of those drugs, when you listen to all the side effects or potential problems you could have, I wouldn't want. You just have to be an educated consumer. Now, in case studies, eyeglasses, they've done studies that states where there's no advertising, the price of the glasses are higher because you don't know what the alternative is. Liquor became cheaper after advertising was allowed because people could make a more educated decision. They may have always purchased this one because that's what they thought they could afford. There's always been, in the last 20 years, there's been discussion about allowing insurance companies to sell across state lines. If they would do that, competition would rise. It used to be none of the insurance companies could advertise or sell across state lines. But they changed it where auto insurance you can. And when that occurred, the price of auto insurance went down significantly. Health insurance should be the next one. And like I said, a lot of the content now is irrelevant. Yeah, the Budweiser with the horse and the dog becoming friends, and that's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with consumption of alcohol. But they want to put that little stamp in your mind where you think about it every time you go consume. I'll let you go through the examples. The chapters in a nutshell, I think you should print those out. In fact, I would print out the learning objectives you see at first of the chapter, and I would print these two as well, or maybe three. That's just two. The other thing I want you to make sure you look at is when you with the exhibits. And this PowerPoint with the exhibits, all it does is show us the graphs. Sometimes this is all you need to help you understand what's going on. Because here we see the perfectly competitive firm versus monopolistically competitive firm. But we can see what's going on with the zero economic profit and what occurs. In this case, we see we're not dealing with a minimization of average total cost like we are here. In this case, we're producing at this point. It's not where the lowest cost can be produced. It's where we can get the greatest price without losing money. Their positions are quite different. But if you just have these available to you, it will help you a lot. Another term you'll hear a lot with that oligopoly is a kink demand curve. And that's because of the strategic interaction. At some point, everybody will just switch, or the prices will change. The competitor will drop their price, and then you respond to their price. It's quite a bit pliable. I mean, theirs is not as rigid as what you would see with monopoly, monopolistic competition, and perfect competition. The term strategic interaction is key, knowing how they behave. Any questions about monopolistic competition? Like I said on chapters 13, 14, 15, I don't know if it would be a bad idea just to print out the exhibits. If nothing else, print out this page so you know what's going on. You can see the rule for maximizing profit, MRS equal MC, applies all the way across. When we get to oligopoly, it'll be the same way. So I don't know if I wouldn't print these out and as part of your study package, so you can understand what is going on with these curves. Any questions? Comments? None at all? Let's see what we're looking at on time. We're 12:01. So what I'll do, I'll be here until 12:15. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Remember, November 3rd is Tuesday. Yeah. Vote. If you're of age, vote. I'm not trying to sway anybody one direction or the other, but that's part of your duty is to vote. If you don't know any of the parties involved, take time to figure it out, what they're saying. Okay? But exercise your right. Any questions? If you have questions, you can stick around. If you don't, if you do have questions, I'm here. We've got people coming back in. We said, I'm not going to cover anything else today. Just be prepared next Monday.